Today's daf is Daf Moed Kattan. Picking up from the Mishnah on Yud Ches Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. Ein koisvin shtari chay b'moed, ksiva on chalamoed is aser. Ksiva is one of the lamites malachas, and so therefore on chalamoed it's aser unless you find one of the heterim of chalamoed. So the Mishnah says that ein koisvin shtari chay b'moed, that if a person lends money to somebody else, you're not allowed to write up the shtar. However, if the lender doesn't trust the borrower, and the concern is that maybe the borrower, after Yontif, is going to say that this loan never occurred, then the halacha is that you're allowed to write the shtar, because then this becomes a malacha that's going to be mutter because it's a davra aved, just like the first mission of the Masechta. Another scenario where, despite ksiva being a malacha, which would be aser, we're going to allow you to do it, is if the sofer, the person who writes up the shtar, needs it for parnasa, and if he needs it for parnasa, then, as we've discussed earlier, you're allowed to do malacha an chalamayid for someone who's a payil she'ein lo mayoichel. So in both of these scenarios, hareza yichtay. That's the Mishnah. Ein koisen svarim tefillin u'mezuzas b'moed. The Mishnah continues, at least with the Tanakama holding, that a person is not allowed to write, a sofer is not allowed to write sifrei Torah, tefillin, or mezuzas b'moed. And the Rishonim speak out over here. What we mean is on chalamayid for after chalamayid. So this would not be a tzarech hamayid. This wouldn't be. There really is no heter mitzad the typical heterim that we typically see by Isser Chalamay, and so therefore the Isser is going to still stay in place. The Rishonim speak out, of course, that if any one of these things were needed on Chalamayit itself, so specifically by a Sefer Torah, where if, let's say, they didn't have a Sefer Torah for Kriyas HaTorah in Shul, then Allah would be avada, it's mutter to do it, and of course, a Sefer is doing a Maisa Umen, so even a Maisa Umen is going to be mutter if it's L'tzarech HaRabim, L'tzarech HaMayit. Continues the Mishnah, Ve'ein Magian Ois Achas Afilu B'Sefer Ezra. The Tanakama's shita again is you can't not only write the Sefer Torah or the Tefillin and Mezuzah, you can't even edit any of the letters in the Sefer Torah. It says over here, Afilu b'Sefer Ezra, which Bepashas was referring to the Sefer Torah of Ezra HaSefer, but it also could be, there's a Giras Rashi mentions Azara meaning the one that was in the Beis HaMikdash, and the Azara, which would have been the Torah that was used as the template for all other Sefer Torah. That's the shita of the Tanakama, that under no circumstances is one allowed to, on Chalamayid, to write any of these svarim, mezuzas, tefillin, if it's done for after Yontif. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, koisiv adam tefillin mezuzas la'atzmei. The only isser is doing it for financial benefit. You're not allowed to sell, you're not allowed to write up a tefillin or a mezuzah, and v'hu adin, the Sefer Torah on Chalamayid, if you're doing it for after Chalamayid, for after Yontif, if the reason why you're doing it is in order for it to be used afterwards, to sell it to someone, you're not allowed to be mistaker from it. However, you're allowed to do it for yourself, because Rabbi Yehuda holds that doing l'tzarech mitzvah, specifically for the mitzvah of tefillin and mezuzah, that's going to be mutter. We'll have to sort of work out what do we mean over here that it's going to be mutter l'tzarech atzmai. Obviously, what it means is not on Yontif itself, at least according to the Rishonim that hold that we don't wear tefillin on Chalamayid. It'll have to be referring to even after Yontif. He's saying it's mutter l'tzarech mitzvah. Continues the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda's shita is v'toiva al yirecha itchelis l'tzitzusai. Tzitzis is a mitzvah min haTorah, and lavdaf ketchelis, any of the strings of tzitzis that you need to be matal on a four-cornered baguette. The halach in the Mishnah is that you can spin it. However, it needs to be done al yirecha. We don't allow it to be done in a normal fashion. It needs to employ some type of a shinoi. The Gemara is going to explain the different levels of shinoi. Zok the Gemara, Taner Rabbanan Ebraisa, koisev adam tefillin mezuzas la'atzmai. This is going to sound very much like the Shita Rabbi Yehuda, and yet we're going to see that Rabbi Yehuda is a different opinion. So we'll have to work out exactly what's going on over here. The Rishonim speak out that this Braisa, this distinct from the Mishnah, is that the Mishnah is talking again where you're doing it on Chalamayid for after Chalamayid, where over there the halacha is it's aser, unless it's l'tzarech mitzvah according to Rabbi Yehuda. And the Bryce is talking about where you're doing it on Chalamayid for Chalamayid. And there what it's saying is koisav adam tefillin mezuzas la'atzmai. Avada, a person's allowed to do it la'atzmai. Why? Because you need it for the yontiv itself. And again, don't bring me a raya from here that you can use tefillin on Chalamayid. Taisa speaks out, because tefillin on Chalamayid, according to Reb Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, is mutter even on Shabbos, kol sheken in Chalamayid. But Lididan, who holds that tefillin is going to be also in Chalamayid, there's no raya from this Bryce. Either way, continues the Bryce. Taner Rabbanan koisav adam tefillin mezuzas la'atzmai v'toive al yirecha itchelis l'tzitziyusa, like the din of the Mishnah, that employing a shinoi, it'll be mutter to spin the cotton together in order to make the strings. Ula acheirim, and if you're doing either one of these things in order to help someone else benefit from them, meaning it sounds like maybe you'd be selling it to them, the halach is that's aser, because it's la'acheirim b'toiva, that can only be done in exchange for favors, that cannot be done in exchange for money. Div Reb Meir. So again, Reb Meir's shita is is that you're allowed to write tefillin and mezuzahs, and you're allowed to spin these tzitzis with a shinui on Yontif for Yontif, meaning on Chol HaMoed for Chol HaMoed, but you can't sell it. You can't do these things in order to sell it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Ma'arim. No, he says that since you're allowed to do it for yourself, he says you can employ some sort of a harama, some sort of a trick. U'moicheres shaloi, you're allowed to sell your own tefillin, your own tzitzis, your own mezuzah, and then once you sell them, you now need a new one, so you'd be allowed to write it. V'chayzev la'atzmai. And the Rishonim speak out what he means to say is you could do this over and over again. So meaning you can effectively sell tefillin, mezuzahs, you can do the malachas of writing these things or spinning the tzitzis on Chol HaMoed. Even though be'etzim you're not supposed to sell, you can use this trick to be able to do it. And Rabbi Yossi Omer, no, you don't even need to employ the trick, you can outright do it. Rabbi Yossi Omer, koisev v'moicher kedarka, you're allowed to do it in a normal fashion, meaning you have your own tefillin, you have your own mezuzah, your own tzitzis. You're allowed to do any one of these three things, and you're allowed to do them lechatchila, and you're allowed to do lechatchila kedei parnasasa. The Rishonim speak out, kedei parnasasa here does not mean you have nothing to eat. If you have nothing to eat, then everyone's masking me to be allowed to do it. What we mean to say over here is that you're doing it just to enhance your yontiv, you enhance your Chol HaMoed, to have a little extra food, a little extra nice things, then it's going to be mutter. Now, it comes out we have three shitas when it comes to selling. Meir says it's aser, Rabbi Yehuda says it's mutter al yidei harama, and Rabbi Yossi says it's mutter legamri lichatchila without any shinuyim. Oiri leRav leRav Chananel v'amri leRabba Bar Chananel leRav Chananel. They paskin the following in this shaila. Halacha kaisev v'meich kedarki kedei panasas like Rabbi Yossi. So and that's the halacha taka that the din is like Rabbi Yossi that if a person wants to write up a sefer Torah, wants to write up mezuzah tefillin, or he wants to spin the tzitzis, at least as negaya the halacha of ksiva, it's going to be mutter to sell it. So you're allowed to write it to sell it, even lechatchila without employing any shina. Taner Rabbanan Ebraisa toive adam al yireicha tchelas litzitzusai, like it says in the Mishnah in the Shita Rabbi Yehuda that you could do it al yidei shinoi. However, zakta Ebraisa avaloi be'evin, you can employ it like a type of stone that was also like a kli to help you spin up the cotton. Div Rebbe Eliezer says you can't use an evan. You can use your legs and use your hands to spin it, but you can't use an evan. That's the Shita Rebbe Eliezer. And the Chachamim, who are chaylik on Rebbe Eliezer, Oimrim, af be'evan, you can use an evan, and as we'll see in a moment, the Chachamim here would say, but you can't use a spindle. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda has a different way of explaining the machlekes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim, and he says Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishmai, meaning in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, that his opinion, Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is that be'evan you're allowed to do it. So not only with your hands on your thigh, but even with an evan. Avaloi be'pelach, you can't use a spindle, which is a kli that is miyuchad for spinning the tzitzis to make them into strings. The Chachamim who are mekel, not only are they being mekel with an evan, oimrim bein be'evan, bein be'pelach, it's mutter. So really it comes out to sort of three shitas, right? It's a machlekes, Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanakama, what the machlekes Chachamim Rebbe Eliezer is, but you effectively have three shitas. You have the most mekel shita, which means you can use mamash a spindle, all the way down to the opinion that would hold Rebbe Eliezer according to Tanakama that you can only do it with your hands. Continues the Gemara to paskin the Shiloh. What's the halacha? Rabbi Yehuda Mashmul v'chein Rabbi Chia bar Ava Rabbi Yochanan halacha bein be'evan bein be'pelach, that we're mekel that you can even use a stone, you can even use a spindle. V'halacha, and as well minogea the halacha of ksiva, like we said earlier, kaisev kedarka like Rabbi Yossi u'moicher, and you could sell it kedei panasasa as long as it's in order to help you with your panasa. Okay, new Mishnah. The halacha is that if a person becomes an avel in the middle of his shiva, as long as it's after 3 days of the first 3 days of his shiva, then becoming an avel is mevatel the shiva. We consider it as if you've already been noyeg the shiva, and therefore the first day of yontif becomes the beginning of shloshim. So it's mevatel the regel, but laheimanuk zera shiva. However, if it's shmoina, meaning what? That you've already been noyeg all your 7 days of shiva, and now you've had an 8th day, so you started shloshim, and now you become a novel. Batlu himanuk zera shloshim. Now we say that it's mevatel shloshim, and what is the reason for this? Because a regel is going to be mevatel. That when Shabbos comes, it does not cancel the shiva, it does not cancel the shloshim. In fact, you count the day of Shabbos towards Shiva or towards Shloshim, and when Shabbos is over, you continue being Noyeg the rest of Shiva or the rest of Shloshim, whereas Regalim Yontiv is Mafsikin, it cancels it, and we consider it as if you've been Noyeg all of the dinim of Shiva or all of the dinim of Shloshim. Ve'enon Oilin, and we don't count the days of the Yontiv towards it, but rather it stops it as if you've now continued, as if you've been Noyeg all 7 days of Shiva or all Shloshim days, 30 days of Shloshim. That is the Shita of this Mishnah. Halach l'maisa, we don't paskin like this Mishnah, at least in one regard. In the beginning din of the Mishnah, it said that Shiva is nisbatal as long as you've observed the first 3 days of Shiva. Halach l'maisa, we'll see a brayso later in the Gemara that holds that that's not true. That the din of the Mishnah would be true even if all you've been noyeg is even 1 day or even 1 hour. As long as you've had a mashu of avelus of Shiva, and then comes Yontiv, if Yontiv comes and is interrupting your Shiva at any point, it's mevatel in it. We treat it as if you've been noyeg all 7 days, whereas this Mishnah is machshiv the first 3 days significantly more than the brayso, as we'll see in a little bit. We halach l'maisa don't hold like this. According to us, even just a mashahu of avelus is going to be in this battle through the arrival of Yontif. Continues the Mishnah. Rebbe Eliezer has an interesting shita, and he says, Omer mishacharav beis hamikdash. Once the beis hamikdash was destroyed, meaning to say that there's no longer a tashlumin for the oilas re'iyah and the Shalmi Chagiga of Yontif for Shavuos, and therefore Shavuos is truly only 1 day. Atzeres is Kishabes, that Shavuos would have a din like Shabbos in that it's not mafsik, it doesn't cancel the Shiva or the Shloshim, and it counts towards the day. Meaning, according to Rebbe Eliezer, the understanding of the difference between Shabbos and Yontiv is that Yontiv is 7 or 8 days or 9 days, depending if it's in Eretz Yisrael, Chutz La'aretz, Sukkot, or Pesach, whereas Shabbos is always only 1 day, so therefore 1 day is always going to not be mafsik, and rather it's going to be counting towards the days, whereas Yontiv is not. So Kol Zman, the Beis HaMikdash was Kayim, and Shavuos had Tashlumei Chagiga, Tashlumei Re'iyah for 7 days after Atzeres, after Shavuos, so it was like one of the other regalim, and it had 7 or 8 days. Mashe'en came after the Churban Babayis, where we're not Noyeg Karbonos, and so there's no reason to have Tashlumin. Really, Shavuos is only 1 day, or maybe 2 days in Chutz La'aretz, and so the point is, according to Rebbe Eliezer, it now reverts back to being like Shabbos, in which case only Pesach and Shavuos would have the din of regel. Rabbi Gamliel Omer, he says that Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippur are keregalim, meaning he holds that it's not about how many days, but rather he understands that the difference between regel and Shabbos is that regel has a din simcha, and since Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are mentioned alongside the other regalim, there's a hekesh between the other Gimel regalim and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur that they'll all be treated keregalim in that they're mafsik, they cancel Shiva and Shloshim, whereas Shabbos doesn't. Now the Chachamim are arguing on both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Gamliel, and will paskin like Rabbi Gamliel and not like Rabbi Eliezer, which means we paskin like the Chachamim in that they argue with Rabbi Eliezer, but we don't paskin like the Chachamim in that they argue with Rabbi Gamliel, and so therefore Chachamim oimrim loy kedivrei zeh v'loy kedivrei zeh. This sheet holds Ella Atzeres keregalim, that we take a hold, that Shavuos is like the regel, and Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is Kishabes, this we don't hold like. So halach lemaisa, the way we hold, connected this Mishnah is that we hold that Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, along with Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, are all mevatel, Shiva or Shloshim, whichever one starts before it, whereas Shabbos it's not. That's how we hold. Although this Mishnah would hold, number one, that you're only going to be mevatel Shiva if you're noyeg 3 days. We hold you don't even need that. And this Mishnah holds that Shavuos, at least according to Rebbe Eliezer, is considered like Shabbos, and we don't hold like that. And this Mishnah's Chachamim holds that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are like Shabbos, and we don't hold like that. Okay, that's the Mishnah. Continues the Gemara, Amar Rav. Rav says that the din of the Mishnah that Yontiv is mevatel the Shiva, or Yontim is mevatel the Shloshim, Amar Rav, Gezeiras bitlu, meaning the Gezeira, the dinim of Shloshim, the reality of Shloshim is considered batal nizbatlu, right? Batlu. However, yomim loy bitlu, we still consider there to be some element of Shloshim even when Yontiv breaks it up. So let's say Lamashal, in the case in the Mishnah, it was that you had 8 days already since that you became an Avel, and then Yontiv happened, let's say on the 9th day. So on the 9th day it's mevatel Shloshim. So on some level, after Yontiv is over, there is going to be some element of a hanhaga of Shloshim, even though we said in the Mishnah it's nisbatel. V'chein Rav Huna says the same thing like Rav, that gezeiras bitlu, however yomim loy bitlu. Rav Sheshes argues, and he says no. Marafilu yomim nami bitlu, that no, once you're mevatel shloshim, then it's completely nisbatel and there's nothing left after Yontiv to be noyek. So now the Gemara is asking, my time yomim loy bitlu, my time here does not mean why, but rather my time, what are you talking about over here, according to Rav and Rav Huna, that there's going to be some echo still remaining of Shloshim, even though Yontiv came and interrupted it, and therefore was mevatel it. So the Gemara says, what it's discussed over here, the machlekes between Rav Sheshes and Rav Huna is as follows. What's the scenario? What's the halacha? She'im loy gilech erev haregel. In this scenario where we're mevatel Shloshim by having Yontiv interrupted, so now you're going to be allowed to shave not only after Yontiv, but we're saying that it's even mutter can be to shave erev Yontiv lekavod Yontiv, because again the whole heter, the whole reason why we're mevatel the Avelus is because the Avelus is a stira to the Simchas Yontiv, meaning it's a covered Yontiv to be not a manuval as you go in, so therefore there's going to be a heter to shave, to get a haircut before. What happens if you did not take advantage of the heter that you're employed when you now have your Avelus nisbatal al yidei Yontiv? So if you didn't take advantage of that, Asur legaleach achar regel, according to Rav and Rav Huna, we knas you, we punish you by basically saying, if you didn't want to take advantage of the heter to shave Erev Yontiv, we're now no longer going to let you shave even after Yontiv is over. That's Shita Rav and Rav Huna, whereas Rav Sheshis would hold no. Once we say that Yontiv is mevatel the Avelus, it's mevatel the Avelus legamri, whether you took advantage of it or not by getting a haircut before. Meaning basically the machlekes is whether there's a knas that you didn't shave beforehand, now we're going to ask you to shave even after Yontiv. Vahatanya, the Gemara says as a raya, this is a benichusa to the shita of Rav Huna and Rav, that there's a knas. Let's see it in the Braisa. If a person buries a mace, meaning he becomes an avel 3 days before Yontiv, then the halacha is shiva, right? Batla himanu gzeira shiva, shiva is done. If it's shmoyne yamim kaidem l'regel, if it's 8 days before, meaning he's already started to noyeg, be noyeg shloshim, then batla himanu gzeira shloshim. And continues the Braisa, and here's the important part for what we need. Umegaleach erev haregel, and you're allowed to shave erev haregel. V'im loy gilech, and if you didn't, erev haregel, erev yontiv, also lagaleach achar haregel. This would be a raya to the shita of Rav and Rav Huna. And this would be like the Chachamim, meaning Rav and Rav Huna, who say there's a knas, would hold like the Chachamim. Abishal argues, Abishal oimer, mutu legaleach achar haregel, that even if you didn't shave erev yontiv, you'd still be allowed to shave afterwards. Why? Shekeshem shemitzas shloisha mivatelas gezerah shiva. Again, we're working within this Braisa, like our Mishnah, that the 3 days in the beginning of Shiva are very important and considered so important that if you're not noyeg them, it's as if we're not mevatlet when Yontiv comes. So as long as you've been noyeg the 3 days, now when your Shiva is interrupted by Yontiv, we say that the Shiva is nisbatel, and that's true even though you didn't take advantage by getting a haircut before. So kach mitzvah Shiva, so too Shiva, if you're noyeg the entire Shiva, and now you're noyeg some of Shloshim, is mavateles gezerah Shloshim, if you've been noyeg some of Shloshim. Meaning to say that the halacha would be that even though you didn't take a haircut, we're going to say that there's no isser to get a haircut, to take a shave after Yontiv is over. So it comes out that Rav and Rav Huna, who are arguing with Rav Sheshis, are really arguing in this machlekes Tanaim as well, that Rav and Rav Huna hold that there's a knas, like the Chachamim, that there's a knas by not shaving, you're not going to allow to shave after. Whereas Rav Sheshis holds no, he holds like Abishal, that if you didn't shave beforehand, even though you were allowed to, we don't knas you, and you're still not going to be able to, you're going to be allowed to shave after Yontiv, and that's the machlekes. Now once the Gemara brings this Braisa, you'll notice that it mentioned the shita of Abishol at the end, who said that as long as you've been noyeg 7 days of Shiva, and then Yontiv comes, the halacha is that you're mevatel shloshim. But we just learned in the Mishnah said that that's only true if you've been noyeg 8 days, meaning you have to start doing shloshim first. You can't be mevatel shloshim unless you've started to be noyeg shloshim. And if you've only gone to the 7th day, then at least at this point in the Gemara, we don't know about any other way to make it that that's considered as if you've started being noyeg shloshim. So the Gemara says, Shiva, v'ha'anon shmeina tanan. Our Mishnah says you need at least 8 days in order to start saying that the Yontiv is interrupting shloshim. So the Gemara says, no, this is the introduction to the Shita of Abishol, which we saw a couple of dapim ago. Kesaver Abishol, miktas hayoim kikuloi. He holds that the last day of Shiva and the last day of shloshim, we don't require you to be noyeg avelos for the entire day, but rather once the sun comes up in the morning and you're noyeg a shtickle, even a mashu in the morning, that is considered as if you finished your Shiva or you finished your shloshim, and the rest of the day is already the next stage. Therefore, v'yom hashvi, during Shiva, the 7th day, is oilaloi lakan ulakan. It's considered the beginning of the day as if it's part of the 7th day of Yeshiva, and it's also the beginning of the 8th day. So even though you've only had 7 actual days of Avelis before Yontiv, you already started Shloshim for the second half of the day, and therefore, according to Abishal, that'll be considered an interruption. But Ein Echanami, the Chachamim who argue, they'll hold that the 7 days are not enough. In order for there to be an interruption of Shloshim, you need to have 8 days. Okay. Amar Rav Chizda, Amar Ravina Bar Shiloi, Halach Kabishal, the Halach is like Abishal, Benegeh, the Sugya of Miktas Hayoim Kikuloi. Umoed Chachamim, however, the Chachamim, who normally do not say Miktas Hayom Kikuloi, will be maskim la'abashol in what scenario? Kishachal Shmini Shaloi Liyas Be'Shabbos Erev HaRegel, that when you have Yontiv falling out on a Sunday, and Motzei Shabbos is the beginning of Yontiv, and Erev Yontiv is Shabbos, and that's the 8th day of the Avelis, that means Shloshim has started. And since Shloshim has started, L'chayra, normally you'd be allowed to shave Erev Yontiv, even the Chachamim will be masking, but since it's Shabbos, you can't shave then, so the Chachamim will be masking that even though the day before that, Erev Shabbos, which is the 7th day, and normally the Chachamim hold that that's mamish in the middle of Shiva, the Chachamim are masking to Abba Shaul that will say Miktzas Hayom Kikuloi there, so that at least B'negea the halacha that you could shave Erev Shabbos, L'kavod Shabbos and Yontiv is going to be mutter, Shechal Shmini Shalol Yos B'Shabbos Erev HaRegel, Shemutter L'galech B'Erev Shabbos. This is the din that we saw earlier in the Gemara when we were discussing it on Daf Yud Zayin. Okay, now Kiman Azla. Once we have this machlekes between Abba Shaul and the Chachamim about Miktzas Hayom Kikulo, who of those two is the following statement going like? Kiman Azla Hada Amar of Amram Amarav. What did he say? Avel Kivin Sha'amdu Menachmin Me'etzloi. Once the people who are sitting shiva get up, and the people who are being menachem them, the people who are going and paying a shiva call, once they get up from the Avel on the 7th day, meaning to say that there's no more people around to be menachem them, there's no more Avelis being noyeg. Once that happens in the morning of the 7th, mutter b'rechitza, now the Avel is allowed to do rechitza, which is something that you're not allowed to do during Shiva, but you'd be allowed to do during Shloshim. This obviously is Keman K'Abba Shaul, because of course Abba Shaul would say Miktzas Yom Kikuloi, meaning Shiva's over. Amar Abaye haloch K'Abba Shaul b'Yom Shiva. Abaye has an interesting shita. He says that the haloch is like Abba Shaul on Shiva. Modim Chachamim la'Abba Shaul b'Yom Shloshim, that the Chachamim who hold normally Miktzas Yom is not Kikulei on Shiva will be masking b'Shloshim, meaning to say that Abaye has a lenient opinion. He says that not only are we going to hold like Abba Shaul ending Shiva, we'll even hold like him, and the Chachamim will be masking by Shloshim, because Shloshim is more Mekol than Shiva. The Amrina and Miktzas Yom Kikulei, they would both be masking to that by Shloshim. Rava Amar no, halacha K'Abba Shaul. The halacha is like Abba Shaul, both by Shiva and by Shloshim, and meaning to say, Rav and Abaye are not arguing in what the halacha would be, it's just that they're arguing about what the machlekes Abba Shaul and the Chachamim are. According to Abaye, even the Chachamim would be masking to Miktzas Hayom Kikulo, and Rav is just saying, halacha K'Abba Shaul b'Yom Shloshim, ve'ein halacha K'Abba Shaul b'Yom Shiva, meaning he holds we're machmir by Shiva, so by Shiva the halacha is going to be, you need to start the 8th day in order for it to be considered that Yontav is mevatel. But when it comes to Shloshim, then we paskin like Abba Shaul that Miktzas Yom Kikuloi. U'Nahardoi Amri, and the base medrash in Nahardah says the following is the halacha. Halacha K'Abba Shaul bizu, that we're always makel Shiva and Shloshim. This is how we hold. The Amar Shmuel halacha K'divrei Mekel be'avel. So therefore, you always try to choose the tzad that is going to be more lenient. And just to point out, this is also true when you start a Shiva. When a person becomes an oval in the middle of the day, we count that first day as a full day, even though it's only a portion of the day, because again, we hold like Abba Shaul that Miktzas Hayom Kikuloi. Continues the Gemara. Now you're saying over here that there's a din of Shloshim Yoimin, and how do we know that it's actually 30? Meaning this second stage of Avelis, which goes from Shiva to Shloshim. Why is it Shloshim? So the Gemara says, Yolef Pera, we learned it out from Gzeir Shavar Min Nazir. The Ksiv Hacha, it says, by Avelis Reishechem Al Tifru, we learned over there by Bnei Aharon, when he was talking to Yitamar over there and Elazar, that he said to them that they should not they should not let their hair grow, meaning they should get a haircut, but the implication was that they have the exception, and most other people would have to be Nayag Avelis by not getting a haircut, that there's an Issa Taspiris. So you see that it says, Pei Reish Ayin Pera, Uksiv Hasan by Nazir, it says Gadel Pera Sa'arosho, that he should grow his hair. So we make a Gzeira Shava Pera. Ma'alaholan by Nazir it's Shloshim, Afkan Shloshim, meaning a Stam Nazir is a Shloshim Yom, so too over here we'll say that the Avelis step is going to be Noyeg is Shloshim Yom. I asked the Gemara of Hasan Nolan, how do we know by Nazir that it's 30 days? Amar of Masna, because with the Stam Nazir is Shloshim Yom, because we know a Stam Nazir is always going to be 30 days, meaning the halacha is the person's Mekabel Naziris and he says I only want it to be for a week, we disregard the week and we say it's 30 days. Now the Gemara says, okay, fine. You told me that we're learning it out from Nazir, and you told me that Nazir, Stam Nazir, is Shloshim Yom. Ask the Gemara, but my time, why Taka is it 30? Amar Kra, because the pasuk says by a Nazir in that same pasuk we just quoted before, Kadosh Yihiyah Yud Hey. What is that? Yihiyah b'gematria tlosan hav. You're right. You have the 2 Yuds is 20, the 2 Heys is 10, 20 and 10 is 30. Therefore, you get to 30. The Rishonim speak out over here. I think it's a tshuva in the Rajban tshuva says that it does not mean that we're actually making this limud from a gematria. I think Rabbi Yashiv speaks this out in his sefer also. It just means it's an asmachta. Avada they had some sort of a Messiah, Allah Moshe Misinai, that a Stam Nazir is 30 days, and the Gzeir Shav is learnt out from there, but Ein Lechanami, the din of the Nazir himself, that's Halach Moshe Misinai, and the Gematria is just a Smach Ba'alma. Continues the Gemara, Amar Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua, HaKol Moedim, meaning Abba Shaul and the Chachamim, are all going to be masking that Shechal Shlishi Shel Aliyah is Erev Regel, when the 3rd day is Erev Regel, She'asabir Rechitza Ad Erev. And the way Rashi speaks this out is in the sheet of our Mishnah that holds that the 3 first days of the Shiva are very chashuv, and if you haven't been noyeg the first 3 days, then we treat those even more chamer than Shiva. And so therefore, if you haven't been noyeg all 3 days to completion, then that's not considered as if you've taken care of it. And so therefore, Hakol Moedim Abashol will be masking the Chachamim that when the 3rd day falls Erev Regel, then we don't say Mitzvah Yom Kikulo that it's also Berechitza Ada Erev. Amrev Nechemia Breder of Yoshua Ashkechasino Lerepepi Lerepapa. I found that Repepi and Repapa the Yasvi, they were sitting with Ka'amri and they were discussing Halach Rav Huna Breder of Yoshua, saying that the halacha is like Rav Huna Breder of Yoshua, like I just mentioned, that when the 3rd day falls out, that you can't asa berechitza all the way. Ika da Amri, there's a different way of explaining the lashon, is that Amr of Nechemia Breder of Yosef, that he found Ashkechisu Lerepapi Lerepapa Ule Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua the Yasvi. They were all sitting around discussing the halacha. Uka Amri, and they were saying Hakol Moedim, that everyone's maskim Sheim Chal Shlishi Shlo Liyos Erev Regel, that if everything falls out Erev Regel on the 3rd day, that we don't say Mitzvah Yom Kikulo She'as Berechitz Ada Erev, meaning to say that in the din of our Mishnah, where the 3 days are required to go all the way to the end of the 3 days, then this halacha would be negeya even on the 3rd day. But according to us, Aliba the Emes, that we hold halacha lemaisa, that an Avel, once he's Nayik, even just an hour of Avelus before Yontiv comes in, that the halacha would be that we're Mevatel the Yontiv, this halacha would not be Negeya. And so as long as, even on the 1st day, the 1st hour, a person's Nayik, even a Shtikal Avelus, if Yontiv then comes, it's Mevatel. We'll hold here for the day. We'll pick up from these lines over here, 6 lines from the bottom in the Gemara, Mitzvah Shem tomorrow with Daf Chaf. Shkoyach everybody.